Well, let's go ahead and dive in to some of the discussion at hand tonight. There's a couple of things I want to bring up, and then I wanted to leave plenty of time for us to discuss, for each of you to kind of share your own practices and your own approach to this as well. But productivity is something that I get asked about quite a bit. In fact, one of the things that kind of started me on this path of like thinking about how to be more efficient, particularly as being an artist, came about probably about 8 years ago. During that time period, I had a full-time job. I was uh, I had another part-time job on top of that. I was a full-time musician touring, and I was in a full-time MBA program. So like many different hats. And I was still like, touring and putting out music and doing stuff. And people would oftentimes ask me like, how do you do everything? Like, how do you have time for everything? And at first I thought, oh, it's because I don't have a Netflix account and I don't have kids. So that seems to like eat up most people's time. But then I realized maybe it was a little bit of something else. And so at first I started challenging people. I said, if you just carve out like 15 dedicated minutes a day and you really focus on that 15 on like what you want to get done, I'm pretty sure you can get a lot of progress in a particular area. Cause like 15 minutes a day, that's 90 hours a year. Like, and if someone said, hey, do you want an extra 90 hours? Of course, like, oh, I could get so much work done. And then if you can carve out an extra 30 minutes, well, that's 180 hours. And it scales up from there. And so during that time period, when I was like in grad school working and touring and doing all this other stuff, I worked on a book for 15 minutes a day, and it eventually became this book called Music Business Hacks, and it became like a bestseller in performing arts category. And that was just in 6 months of work. I just said every single day, I'm going to carve out at least 15 minutes. I'll just like work during lunch or whatever and type out whatever I can, even if it's junk. And then I'll, see what happens at the end of this. And so thankfully I was able to produce this thing, and it seemed to do okay. And, to this day, I now do a regular podcast called Music Business Hacks that are built on these same kinds of concepts. Like what if I help produce an instruction manual or a cooking recipe book, but for music business? Like if you don't know what to do, just turn to one of these pages or listen to one of these episodes, work on that for 15 minutes, and you'll get a little bit more ahead. So that was kind of my mindset going in. As I started thinking about tonight's session, I was like, really when we talk about wanting to get more done as artists, like to be more productive, really there's only two ways to go about this. One is you either have more time, so you have more time to work on your craft and the things that matter to you or the things that support that craft, or you increase your efficiency, like doing more with less time. If you could increase like both areas at once, then you're in really, really good shape. But if you could only do like one or the other, then I would make the argument that like that efficiency part is going to be a lot more meaningful, because somebody who says, okay, I am going to dedicate like a really focused, tight 15 minutes on, say, driving social media engagement. That means like, really crafting together a strategic post and way you reach out to fans or even connecting with folks. They're going to get more done than someone who's just scrolling for 4 hours on Instagram or watching videos on TikTok or like on some endless stream, like, because that's unfocused time. And so tonight I want to talk a bit more about the efficiency piece, because there are people who will make arguments, and I've seen a lot of music industry presenters at sessions, and they're like, you just got to get up an hour earlier every day, because an hour earlier every day is 7 hours a week, and that's more than your competition, who, etc. Yeah, like that's fine, and I'm not gonna like go into details about that, because that's just math. Like if you really want to get up earlier or stay up later, you're more than welcome to. But today I want to talk about that kind of like focus part. So when I either coach artists or do consulting work with them, I always say like to be more efficient, you have to be more efficient towards something, like a very specific set of goals. And so I use a system called SMARTER. Like a lot of times people use this acronym, SMART goals, which is like your goals need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they have to be attainable, they have to be relevant or realistic, and they have to be time bound. So specific, measurable, attainable, relevant or realistic, and time bound. And I like to say goals shouldn't just be smart. They should be smarter. So that extra E in the R is that they should involve everyone. Everyone on your team should be included in your goals. They need to be vested into this. And by everyone, I don't just mean like the people in your band or the people that you collaborate with in terms of your music. I mean, everybody who's important to you in your life, the people who are closest to you. If you have a spouse or significant other, they need to be vested in that goal as well. Because I will tell you, over the many years I worked in this industry, that I've been, including my own band members, I've seen this time and time again, where they are extremely committed to a goal. They're like, okay, I want to tour the world. I want to be this musician. I want to do all this stuff. And then their spouse is not on board with them being gone 6 to 10 months a year. I will tell you that artist will not last in the industry, because one of two things is going to break, either the band or their marriage, or sometimes both. So you need to make sure that like everyone is involved, and from management and attorneys to everyone else to the people actually closest to you. And then the second R there that I like to throw in is revisit. You have to revisit your goals on a regular basis. You got to check in with them and see how you're doing. Because if you just say, you know what, I'm going to like at every New Year's, I'm going to jot down all my goals. I'm going to write them down, or I'm going to put them in the spreadsheet. And maybe I'll hang them up on the wall, but then you don't actually check in whether you're actually doing things to work towards those goals or not. Those aren't goals. They're just dreams that you just set and forget. And things that are not top of mind will oftentimes slip away in terms of like your priorities list, because everything else is going to just get in the way of that. There are, for example, like people who wake up and the first thing that they do is check their email, right, or their social media messages. They are basically planning the rest of their day. Their day is going to be dictated by responding to what other people will prioritize for them. Like the email asks that they get, the things that people say, hey, can you do this for me or that for me? Instead of the people who wake up thinking, what are the things I absolutely have to get done today, no matter what? Make that list, work on that list, and then say, okay, now that I've prioritized myself and my goals, I'll go see what else is out there in the world. You know, you want to do an interview, you want to work on a writing project, you want to book a show, whatever, that's great, but you got to have that priorities like system, like, and it's got to be based on what your actual goals are. One other way that I oftentimes like to illustrate all of this is that I tell artists that they should imagine their work or their career like a house, like a physical building. And I oftentimes nickname this the house of music. The things that we think are important sometimes aren't actually the most important thing. And that's why it's important to have very clear goals. So let's say in this example, you have a house and your goal as that homeowner is to get people to walk into your house, be entertained, and then go to the backyard, because that's where the party is. You know, you've got everything set up for them. You want them to stay a while, right? You want to grow that fan base. You want them to go to the backyard. In this scenario, and very much in our artists' lives, you have to think about like what constitutes a house. Now, the front yard, the outside, what people can see from the street, that's your social media, that's your marketing. And a lot of times artists will think that is their house when it is in fact not. That's just what attracts people in because they can see it from afar. That's your website, your EPK. Maybe if you have publicity, like all the PR that you have about you, it's what gets people attracted to it. And of course, if that stuff is a mess, if you don't have a website, people are gonna be a lot less inclined to come in, but it's not the actual house itself. And if you think about like how a house is made, like a living room is where you welcome people in. So that's that first interaction that people have with you. Usually it's going to be the first works of art you have or any kind of engagement. If you're a performing artist, these are your concerts in addition to your albums. If you're a writer, these are your books. If you're a visual artist, these are your paintings and sculptures and that sort of thing. And of course, the kitchen, that's where the mess is, right? You don't want people to go into your kitchen because you're like, that's where I'm working. That's where things are not quite complete yet. That's like stuff in process. And then above that, all the rooms above, all your bedrooms, those are your revenue sources. Those are your things that actually make this whole thing sustainable. So if you're a musician, this could be streaming, it could be licensing, performances, merch sales. The list goes on. And what's cool about this is like everybody's house can look a little bit different. Some artists like myself and Amy, you mentioned this as well, and like, for example, Joe, like might maybe have a lot of different kinds of rooms, like a film room, a music room, like a writing room, and we have different kinds of types of creativity that we like to express, but they're still all going to be a part of like our career and who we are as an artist. So if you think about that physical layout, just like in real life, I can attest to this because like 45 minutes ago, I was outside digging holes, trying to rip out English ivy in my house. And I've been, just remodeled the kitchen of this particular place because my house was built in the 1800s. Like, a house needs maintenance in all the areas if you want to function. If you let any area kind of go stagnant, like mold will grow and it could actually threaten the entire structure. The same thing goes for an artist's career. If you're only paying attention to like one particular area, like say, I'm only going to create art here and I'm not going to pay attention to the fans that are coming into the front door, then you're going to have a problem. If you're only doing the business part and only like entertaining folks and you're not actually spending time improving as an artist, then that's going to be a different kind of problem. And same thing if you let some certain revenue streams languish. So you have to think about like if you were to actually illustrate your career as this house, and I oftentimes recommend people to just draw it, like grab a piece of paper and just start drawing each compartment so you can have a much fuller picture of what constitutes your career. Then you'll be able to prioritize like looking at what areas need to be addressed. Now, as you know, buildings can scale. You can have a tiny house, like they're very, very popular in Portland and other hipster communities, or you could have like this major condo system, right? You could have all kinds of roommates, you could house an entire family. But no matter what, every building that is on this planet is the same as your career. It's built on and it's limited by its foundation. The foundation of your artist's house, those are your goals. So depending on what goals you have, that can limit or your scale, your ability to grow, or it can actually empower you so that you can make those additions, so you can expand. And of course, remember, all of this is to serve a purpose, and that's to get people into the backyard so that they are sustaining fans, so they stick around for a while. There's Kevin Kelly, who's a tech guy, actually oftentimes wrote about this thing. He called it the 1,000 true fans theory. And a lot of people like to speak about it in the music industry, but it's not just for music. It could be for nearly any other kind of craft. And Kevin Kelly's argument is that you only need 1,000, only 1,000 true fans. If whatever endeavor you have, if you can get 1,000 true fans, that's all you need to focus on, because that's enough to sustain you so that you can keep on creating art. He defines 1,000 true fans in the kind of way, like it's the kind of fan that will drive 8 hours to go see your show. It's the kind of fan who will spend on average $100 a year on your merchandise or your work of art or whatever it is that you do. Because, if you think about it, you get 1,000 people that will pay $100 a year, you just got yourself a 6-figure income just from that alone. And of course, I understand there's costs associated with making things, right? Like just because you sell a t-shirt for $20 doesn't mean you profit $20. But the model is true that when you focus on that small, viable audience, the people that are the most excited about you, it allows you to focus in on the people that matter the most. And it also allows you to get a greater return of your investment of your time. But the other part of that is that when people are paid attention to in that really direct and specific way, they're more likely to come back and they're more likely to share what you have with their friends and family and that sort of thing. So like Kenneth in his introduction was saying, like he wanted to do something different than everybody else, make something really exclusive that's for their fan base only. I guarantee you those people are going to appreciate that work a lot more than if it was just out for for every single person on the entire planet. And while this is one of many, many different approaches, you could think of it in a couple of other ways. Like, for example, imagine that there's a restaurant you like going to, or a coffee shop that you go to, and instead of you just getting a postcard in the mail for like their newest latte special, or like a $2 off their newest item, or whatever it is, or just seeing a post on your Facebook feed because let's say you just really, really like them and you follow them on social media. Instead of seeing all that, imagine if the owner who wrote you a handwritten letter with your first name, just saying, thank you so much for supporting this business. Thanks for supporting my family. I appreciate you so much. Hey, the next time I come in, I'm going to give you something really special on the house. I created this dish just for you because I know the stuff that you always order, but let me show you something really new and different. Imagine that. You would be a customer for life. Like, you'd be there, up in there all the time. So that's kind of the idea of like spending more time to cultivate those specific 1,000 true fans as opposed to just like masses. Now, the other part of this is someone else kind of mentioned this as well. I think maybe it was Corinne, of like kind of like juggling or prioritizing, or maybe it was Ashley, like, and keeping the creative part going. Like, we have to deal with human nature, and human nature is that we don't like doing things that we don't like to do. So it is important to find joy in the things that sustain this like artist's house. And that either requires like actually just genuinely enjoying these things. Like, some people really, really like making TikTok videos, or some people really, really like, doing the business part of their business, and others can't stand it. Well, whether if you're not able to like actually find it, then I would say like that would be requiring a shift of perspective, and that mind shift of like how to approach this work oftentimes can make that difference. Because then all of a sudden, instead of thinking, oh, I gotta make X number of social media posts this week, and it feels like a drag, think of it as like, I have the privilege, the opportunity to connect with fans who are like, I'm taking time away from them, from their families, and from the things that they got going on, to blast out what I got going on. And the fact that they follow me, invest in me, that is a really cool thing. Or, you can even reward yourself with this. Like, think about people who say like, okay, if I work out for a certain amount of time, then I get a certain treat or something like that. Treat yourself to an ice cream if you want, whatever it is. Like, find where those pain points are and treat yourself for it. But in addition to that, I oftentimes like to tell people you should do something that you don't like to do every single day, just for the practice, just for the idea of getting disciplined in this. So one of my favorite resources, and I recommend this to like every artist. In fact, I buy like copies of this book in bulk so I can give it out to people. It's called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. And Steven Pressfield has one particular approach, and I will say that there are other writers and other artists who have a different one. But if you find this particular like method helpful, and I certainly have, what he says is like, if you want to be a writer, you have to do what writers do, which is to write. He doesn't believe in such thing as writer's block. And you call it writer's block or artist block or musician block or whatever block it is. He doesn't believe in that. He believes in something called resistance, which is our natural tendency to just not do anything. Maybe it's because we're afraid of publishing, maybe because we get distractions, whatever it is. He calls it resistance. And he says the only way to be what it is that you want to be is to do what that thing is. So if you're a filmmaker, you should be making films, not thinking about making films, not complaining about not making films, just going out and actually doing the work. His argument is that you should show up with the same attitude as the plumber, because guaranteed the plumber does not wake up thinking that they want to clean out other people's crap, but they will do it anyway because that is their job. And so they will go to work. And he says, as an artist, as a creative, you need to go to work whether you feel like it or not. And when you build that kind of discipline and say, you know what, I'm sitting down for X number of hours, or I'm going to sit down and write X number of pages, no matter what, even if it is total garbage, like I am there to show up to produce. And obviously some days you'll feel like producing more than others. Some days you'll have things that you produce that you're more proud of than others. But the fact is that if you're able to show up every single day at a designated time to do that work, you're more likely to actually get going and get into, you know, what some people call the flow, like that artist flow, where you're just tapping into that creative spirit and things are rolling and you feel really, really good about that product. It's a great book. There's a lot more tips in there. And he has a lot of other really, really solid works, especially for authors. I highly recommend his works. And so it kind of related to that, I oftentimes say that you should basically create calendar entries, like, you know, Google Calendar is like my BFF, right? I block out certain amounts of time, and that time should be your default time, whatever it is that you're going to prioritize. So if you, much in the same way, like if you have a day job, you'll know that like if you don't show up to work, you get in trouble for that. You have to show up no matter what. If you have a date with a significant other and you don't show up, you better believe you're going to hear about it. The thing is, we don't put ourselves through the same ringer, like we rarely do. And so we need to treat ourselves with the same level of priority, like the time that we carve out specifically for working. And then you can choose what to work on if you calendared in advance. Say, okay, you know, whether I like it or not, for these hours on these days, I am going to just work on the art part of my career. And for these hours and these days, I'm going to work on the business part, the things that, and as artists, it's certainly not as fun as actually getting into our craft, but that business part is what makes the art actually sustainable so that we can keep on doing that thing. And if we invest in the business part, obviously it allows us to grow and flourish so that we can do more of the arts thing. So we have to kind of prioritize. And there's no like set way of determining like how much time you should do what. That's going to be different for each person, especially if you have a team helping you out. But it is important to just be mindful, like you have to get certain things done. And if you get into a rhythm, then you just a regular habit of doing those certain things at those days and weeks, like it's just kind of like you don't even think about it at that point. Like, oh, of course, I'm working on building my Twitter channel. It's Tuesday. Or of course, I'm working on writing new stuff because it's Wednesday at 12 p.m. or whatever hours it is. Like make a date for yourself. And make sure you keep up with it. You can even like do rewards and punishments. Like if you don't show up for your set time, what are the consequences? What are you gonna do? Are you going to do something else to invest in your career? Like, you know, like put money aside for new equipment or for publicity campaign or something like that? Are you going to, you know, do something that are you going to take away time from something else in order to make up for it? Like these are all things that you can figure out yourself, but like whatever it is, like we should be building this in. And the really nice thing is like when you're working with a program, like having like these really smart goals, like, okay, this is where I want to be in 1 year and 3 years and 10 years, or even in 3 months from now. You could take that end goal and start working backwards and calendar in certain milestones and certain work that needs to be done. So for example, if you're dropping a new release, you say, I'm working on this new single, it's really hot, I want to share it with the world. I'm going to schedule it to be released in 6 months because I know it'll be done by then. Then you know, okay, 4 months from that deadline, so in 2 months, I need to start reaching out to bloggers or playlisters or people like that. I need time for it to shop around before it goes public. I need time to write a press release. I need time to start building the images and the other assets that I need to promote that work. And so if you start in advance, you're not thinking about it like the day before, or worse, after it's already released. And you're like, okay, now how do I promote this thing? Because it's already out there in the world. You can actually calendar this in and have a schedule. And what's really great about that is you can invite other people to help you on that and keep you accountable for that, especially if you collaborate with other folks. So those are some the kind of high level ideas that I oftentimes share with folks. I would love to like open this up for folks who have specific questions, personal experiences, tips, and things that you enjoy and like to use in your own particular path.
Oh, okay. I'll just go quick. But this is one thing that always works for me for writing, and I feel like probably I haven't actually tried it with music. Well, no, I think I use it more often for writing, but there's something called the Pomodoro Technique, which is like really nice, and I actually do it even for shorter time spans because I struggle. But the whole concept of it that I like is because I tend to overthink sometimes, unless it's like I have a whole idea for a song, I'm just gonna just put it out. Rarely that happens. So like it's really helpful because it doesn't let you think. Like how I do is I literally have a timer that rings and I have everything shut off and I just feel like I'm racing towards the timer. So I don't let myself think. And I usually do actually like 10 or 15 minutes. Um, 25 minutes is also good, but sometimes if I don't have enough time, I'll just set like 15 minutes and I'll put on like a really loud timer and have like if I'm listening to music or just silence. And like I almost like it because it feels like a challenge. It's like how much can I get out of my system, you know? Like it almost feels like because like I know that I have the ideas in my head, but it's like there's so many things blocking it. So it's like I'm just like lifting it and like letting the horses run out. So that really helps sometimes just to like literally kickstart, like say if I'm in a session of like trying to oftentimes it's writing an article and I'm just like thinking too much about it. I'll just like set up 15 minutes and just like brain vomit, word vomit, and then fix it up. And usually by then, by the time those 15 minutes are done, I'm like in the flow and I know exactly how to edit it. I know exactly how to piece it together, but it's just that like first hump, I guess, that I have to get over and then I'm fine. So if there are other overthinkers out there, I highly recommend literally using a timer that will go off and just like working towards that. It's helped me immensely.
Yeah, it's amazing how limits oftentimes unleash creativity. Like when you force yourself to work within a certain amount of time, you tend to do more with that time than if you just have like this vast blank canvas in terms of like how to fill your day. Uh, and having that focus time is also helpful because just getting started is oftentimes the biggest hurdle of all. In fact, Tim Ferriss, who is the author of the 4 Hour Work Week, he oftentimes say you should, if you have trouble, say remembering to floss every day, because if you took a survey of Americans, not a lot of Americans floss every single day. He says just floss between two teeth, and that's enough. Because what happens is like you floss between two teeth and you're like, well, I'm already here. I might as well just, I already got the floss. It's already wrapped around my finger or whatever it is. I might as well just keep going. Or make it as easy as possible, which like, get those toothpicks that already have it on. So it's not, you don't have to wrap it around. Like you, you can make the process easier for yourself. In the same way that like, if you have just struggling to go to the gym, go to sleep in your gym clothes. When you wake up, you're like, well, I'm already dressed for the gym. Or just show up to the gym and say, I'm going to make a commitment to work out for 3 minutes. Well, chances are if you just work out for 3 minutes, you're like, okay, I might as well hit the treadmill or do the thing for a little bit longer. And the same thing goes for creative flow. Like once you're there in that spot. But the Pomodoro technique, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Simon, so I have a question about delegating. Like, because you have, I'm sure, like, when you started off, you were just doing everything yourself. Like, is that how it started off, or you already knew how to, like, just, okay. Like, how did you, if you remember, like, how did you start just, like, figuring out, okay, I gotta, like, give this to this person, I gotta give this to this person, because I gotta focus on this other stuff. Because that's what I'm having trouble right now. Like, I've actually found an intern to help out with my stuff, but like I don't know what to give her to do, nor do I think there's like enough time to like teach her to do the things that need to be done. And like I just have so much more help now, but I'm like shit, I don't know how to use it as well as I can. Like it's a great problem to have, but I'm like I want to be efficient with it.
That's a great question. And, honestly, this is something I still struggle with is delegating. And I think that for most of our band's career, I think I handled nearly everything in it. It wasn't until towards the end, as I was just starting to lose steam and getting burnt out, I was like, I just can't do all of this on my own. So I started making a list and thinking, okay, what are the things that only I can do no matter what? Maybe it's because of a relationship that I have with a certain contact. Maybe it's with a certain skill set. Like those are the things that I have to do no matter what. And if they're high priority and like high urgency, so like very quick deadlines coming up, then that's not stuff that I delegate. Things that I think I can help unload because I don't have to be the specific person to do it. Those are the things that are like a greater candidate for delegation. So like if you were to like draw out, like say, like if you were to make a to-do list, you can categorize it by like in 4 kind of quadrants. And it's based on urgency and priority. So things that are high priority and high urgency, those are the things that you want to get done right away. Those are the things that you want to do every day, like the stuff that you want to like cross off your to-do list. That's just stuff that you do for yourself. Things that are like high urgency, but low priority, like oftentimes those are the things that you can actually delegate. So because those are the time suck things. Like if you can unload a bunch of communications work or reaching out to people or things like that, and have someone take care of that for you, that'll even though you need to spend time up front to invest into like say mentoring them or getting them up to speed, it's worth your while because over the long run, you're going to get a lot more time back. Things that are, say, high priority but low urgency, those you tend to want to tackle with a team because you're like, okay, this is a massive project. So an example of this is like you want to write a new album or something like that. Generally, it's a high priority because it's like a big part of your career, but it's kind of low urgency because you don't have a set deadline, or maybe you can do it in a year or two in advance. And so you can kind of collaborate with folks. And maybe in the process of collaboration, you might find, hey, this person has this untapped potential or skill set, and those are things that I can delegate to as well. So like you could start just thinking about like how urgent is this kind of thing? Like and oftentimes when we like break things apart like in this particular way, we start realizing, oh, the stuff that I think is super important, I can actually wait on a little bit. So maybe I can get some help with in that particular area. And then on top of that, if like you have an intern or you get someone helping you out, like you also want to play to their strengths or to things that they like an area that they would like to grow in or to learn. And those are could be things that would be mutually beneficial to you because like you want them to be excited about it as well.
So I actually have like a virtual assistant because I have multiple pen names. I have one pen name and then I have another pen name with a co-written series that is a separate like business entity unto itself. And so I have a virtual assistant handling certain things. And one of the hacks that I've found is there's this extension that you can add to your browser called loom.com. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but I don't know if in the song and music industry, you have as much to do on the web, like uploading metadata and all that other stuff and setting up Facebook ads. So with Loom, you can record a quick video, like do what you need to do for like, I don't know, like maintaining your website, right? And you can record and explain what you are doing as you record, and it will save that video as a link. And so now I have like an entire Google Doc full of links of like, this is how you log into my website and change up all the links. This is how you upload a book to say Barnes and Noble, and this is how you upload the metadata. And so once I've made that video, now like I can just send it over to my VA, or if in the future, if she decides to leave, I can send it over to another VA and say, this is how I did it. Here's the video, look at it. And then like, if you have any questions, then you can ask me. That way you're not constantly explaining to someone all the time, this is how you enter all the keywords for this product here. So yeah, that's one of the things I do.
Super helpful. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Simon. That's awesome.
And documenting like your own process is actually extremely helpful for yourself too, because then you could think if you can explain it to somebody else, If you could teach somebody else, you oftentimes will understand your own process better, because then you start thinking about it like step by step, like, okay, how do I actually produce this thing? And just knowing that is really good, because it gives you an opportunity to examine that work under like if somebody was like publicly scrutinizing it, and then you can think, where can I create efficiencies in this process? Like, how can I, am I actually duplicating the amount of work? You can figure that out. Another tool that I found really helpful is something called Toggle, Toggl. And Toggle is, you can download it as an app on your phone, or you can install it in your internet browser. There's a lot of capabilities that it has, and that there's a free version as well as an expanded version. And what Toggle does is it's really good for people who have either multiple projects, like you do a lot of different kinds of things, or who have multiple clients, because you basically start a timer anytime you start a new task, and then you just end the timer when you're done, and you start it again when you start a different task. And so it's a really great way to start tracking the amount of time that you spend on whatever it is that you're doing, because then you could start looking, like you can get a visual representation via pie graph or like bar graph at the end of the week and say, oh crap, I didn't spend any of the time that this week that I wanted on these particular things, because you can create categories of work for you. And it's great for, people who have clients, because then you can say, oh, here are my billable hours for the project. Like, this is down to the minute how much time I spent on these particular days. So as you use it for yourself, you can say like, hey, it's kind of a tool for you to measure your own process. And I find it helpful, because if I say want to commit to each of these buckets that I have, or like the different rooms in my artist's house, I can keep track of that time and say, okay, am I actually doing all of these different things, and making sure that I'm paying attention to each of these projects in an appropriate manner. Other questions or perspectives or tips and things that you want to share?
How much of the stuff that you know now did you do like before, when you were just doing everything? Like, were you like, was this how you kept yourself like doing everything without going too crazy?
I mean, a lot of these processes I've had for a while, and a lot of it started kind of at an early age. So like at the age of 13, somebody gave me this book called Developing the Leader Within You by John C. Maxwell. And I remember reading it. It's not a normal book for like teenagers to read, but I was like, yo, there's so much potential. Like, I'm going to dedicate it to reading at least 2 books a month for the rest of my life on management, sales, communications, and efficiency. And so since then, I've actually grown this huge leadership library. And I actually had like at one point like 800 books on the subject. And so every year I just started giving out, like I would write an entry on my blog and say, hey, tell me a project you're working on, and I'm going to send you a book based on that project. I'll pick it out for you personally and write a note of why I picked it and that kind of thing. So I started clearing out the library to kind of pay it forward. So a lot of these things have been around a while, but I think it takes years of discipline and practice to really like understand how the techniques could be like helpful. And sometimes the advice is more helpful at certain stages of your career than others. So like early on, I was one of those people that say, okay, like, remember I said there's 2 things you can do for increasing your ability to like produce more. You can increase your time, or you can increase your efficiency. And I was like, well, I could definitely increase my time. So I would, shorten the amount of sleep that I got. And I think for a while I was averaging like 4 or 5 hours a night, just getting up early, just hustling, working on my projects and that kind of thing. Nowadays, like, I feel really, really exhausted if I don't get like at least 8 hours of sleep. And maybe it's because like I'm getting older or what, but like I also didn't prioritize self-care then at all. Like it was, I considered it a waste of time. And nowadays I try and do a little bit better job about this. Although my wife will sometimes, like, she made this comment, I think earlier today, she's like, do you know what the word relaxation is? Because like I was gonna take the day off, and I woke up working on the house, and then I started doing other stuff, and I was like, oh, I gotta write this book for Oxford, and I gotta do this thing. It's just like, this was your day off, and I was like, well, yeah, but I got to clear my email box. Like I never get to do that, and so who knows? It's still a lesson I'm like still trying to learn, but I think it is important to have like a level of self-awareness and to like be in tune with your own needs, so you can keep track of like where you want to be, because like you might have like all these ambitious goals, like, oh, I want to like have like a blockbuster film, I want to have a best-selling book, I want to have like, I want to be featured in Pitchfork for my music or whatever it is, like, but if you do it like that, they were in a way that runs yourself ragged, it's not sustainable. And like you might get to that point, but then you might just be like, you know what, I got to this stage that I thought was really, really important to me. Turns out it's not as important as I thought. And now I don't even want to work on my art anymore. Like that's not a good, healthy place to be. So I do think it's important to like to balance. And so like, earlier I kind of shared that there's a different ways to think about like what your art house or your career is looking like in terms of a building. You can also think about it in terms of like there are certain areas that you really want to make sure you're paying attention to, like the art itself, like your medium, your form of expression to the world. That's really important. And for us at the Slants Foundation, this is why we do so much to invest into artists in any way possible, because like we think that like that's literally a way of changing the world, is changing the culture and the works that come from it. So like you want to guard that, absolutely, but you do want to invest in that business part, like the stuff that, because that's what makes your art sustainable. And you also want to invest in like growing your audience, because that's what allows you to also scale up and reach more people and change more lives with the work that you do. But it's only possible if you have like self-care, rest, and on top of all that, you absolutely ought to make time for community, like connecting with other people, and to give back to the community either through philanthropy, donating your time, your talents, or something like that. All those things that contribute to like a healthy arts career. And so like that's why, even though a lot of our like say artist think tank workshops are like very, very like industry and business focused, I'm always like, that's to sustain your career, but like without like having focus on like all these other areas, it's going to feel meaningless. And so that's why it's important to like bring all that to like, and to remember to like bring it to life and to focus on it.
I guess kind of going off of that, and you did mention it towards the tail end, but like, do you schedule in time for like self-care and like mental health kind of check-ins? Because like to just kind of check in on yourself, because like one thing that I'm kind of worried about, like I do think routines are good, and like having that practice and that discipline, but like what if I get to a point where it's like I feel really burned out, like I guess like where's the flexibility, and how does mental health kind of like engage with this structure that you were proposing?
Well, no, that's a great question. So I think on top of like having very specific goals about say where you want to be as an artist, like, and that might be the amount of fans you have, the work sold, or that kind of thing, or income level. It's also important to have mental health and wellness and physical health as part of your goals. Like you want to be healthy. And when you think about that as a goal, how are you going to work towards it? So that means absolutely dedicating time for it. And so for me, I don't like schedule in time for like mental health practices. I just make it a habit. So one of the things that I like to do is like when I wake up every single day, I think about 3 things that I'm grateful for. And it could be small things or that kind of thing, but I try and make it not like a habitual thing, like, oh, I'm grateful for my family or something like that. I try and think of very, very specific things, and I make it a point where I cannot repeat the same 3, like any of the same 3 things every day. I have to think of new things. And then at the end of the day, I do this thing. It's called the gratitude alphabet. It helps me fall asleep, actually. I think of like different moments of the day, and I think like, okay, the letter A, what's something that I'm grateful for that starts with the letter A? Maybe like, oh, I had a really delicious apple, I'm really grateful that it sustains me, or that kind of thing. You know, B, like I got time in the, you know, backyard, or this great book, or whatever it is. And I just kind of cycle through and think like, what are the things I'm really grateful for? And I find that that practice of gratitude is a really, really good way of helping ground me. It reminds me of my own life priorities, because if I'm not actually working towards the things I care about, it's very hard for me to like be centered and focused. And it also is a good reminder for me of like trying to find ways to express that gratitude, particularly when it involves other people. It's so easy to take for granted other people in our lives who contribute to our lives, who support our art in some kind of way, who make it like possible for us to do the things that we love. And I think it's important to keep them top of mind, and to share that in some kind of way. So that's kind of how I try and build in mental health for myself. I will say that there are days where I don't feel so good, where I wake up and I just not really in that spot, but I just say, okay, like I have no choice. Like before I get out of bed, this is my practice. This is what I have to do. And before I go to sleep, this is what I got to do. And what's interesting is like, I found that I may be really like upset by something, maybe some turn of events, some difficulty or challenge. But when I slip into that mindset at night, it brings a sense of peace and wellness. And so I found that to be really helpful. I know other people have like many other approaches to this, but that's something that I've found to be particularly helpful, especially in the last couple of years.
I love the idea of that gratitude alphabet. That just sounds, that's that's really, really, yeah, I can see it totally how it would ground you. Yeah.
I think it was from, I heard a podcast. I think his name is A.J. Jacobs or something like that. He is an author who wanted to like think about how things were made, and realize the interconnected of everything. So like, for example, and he went on what he called a gratitude tour. So he's like, okay, I just want to thank everybody in my life, and all the people involved. So it started out with the cup of coffee made. And it's just like, okay. It's like, well, I can't just thank the barista. I have to think of like the people who cultivated the beans, and then the distributor. And then like he realized he had to thank the people that paved the road so that the truck could drive on there. And he went on this entire quest. And for the single cup of coffee, he realized it involved like 500 plus people. He even went to like a pesticide company that treated an area for rodents because they made sure that like insects and stuff didn't crawl into the coffee. And he like flew around the world to meet this person. And they're just like, okay. And he's just like, I want to thank you. I had this great cup of coffee. It's because of you. And then he just realized that when he kind of embraced this mindset, and then he did this thing. I think he did the gratitude alphabet. Like he's just like, oh, it's just a really good way to bring peace into your life and fall asleep. So, and it brings more meaning into everything that we do.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that I mean, like I feel like the last years I've just been hustling. I've young kids at home, so I feel like it's so easy to just lose track of what you're grateful for, and also just to celebrate those little wins like here and there that you get like from your career, like, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, like finding joy in what we do and celebrating those wins is important, particularly for artists who are like, as your career is on the rise, we tend to take it for granted, like, the milestones or achievements or that kind of thing. And it's like, we oftentimes forget. Like, I've been around, I've probably been to like thousands and thousands of performances over the years, just from touring and just seeing many, many acts. And I always thought it was interesting where sometimes a performer would be unhappy that there was a smaller crowd than they anticipated. And that dissatisfaction or that lack of appreciation would come through in their performance. And it always frustrated me so much. I'm like, I don't care if there's only like 5 people here or 10 people here. Like, those are 5 or 10 people who could be doing literally anything else in the world, but they chose to spend their time driving here, paying admission, try to make an evening of this. And instead of making it like something special, you're rewarding them for that, like because they actually want to be here and like be a part of what you're doing. You're just like upset because other people who don't appreciate it aren't here. And it's like, it's just so easy to slip into that mindset. And I've certainly have felt that way myself over the years, like from time to time. And I was just like, wow, the fact that people are actually like enjoying or experiencing something that we created from our imaginations, like that's really, really, really awesome. And so just to be able to like sit with that and then use that and tap into that feeling whenever we're feeling like demotivated or like just not wanting to do whatever, like it's an easy, it helps you slip into that mindset of like, okay, I got to get this done for those people or to do those things.
How do you guys celebrate your tiny wins? Because I'm terrible at that. I just keep going. Like I don't stop. And I don't know how to like stop and sniff the flowers. So like I would love like to hear how you guys do it so I can kind of incorporate that into my life.
Can I tell you my totally
Oh,
ridiculous Asian way of doing it before the pandemic? There's this one bubble tea place that has like absurdly priced bubble tea. It's like $9. So I go and get my fancy $9 bubble tea. And I couldn't do it because they closed up for like during the time the pandemic was like closed. I don't know. I'm hoping that they reopen soon, but yeah, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. So yeah, we have $9 bubble tea over here.
Um, I am the sentimental type. So one thing I do is I literally have a photo album of whenever anyone has sent me a message of like, "Hey, I listened through what you put up on SoundCloud. This was my favorite song." Or like, I think the thing that like really threw me off was this one acquaintance was like, "Whenever I feel really anxious, like I listen to your music and it helps me like calm down." And I was just like, "Bro, what?" Like, and like, so I just have literally a folder that I can just like go to and just like look at like those little things. And it's not even, and it's not necessarily because I feel like those messages like are more meaningful. Um, and then also what I'll do sometimes, I haven't been doing it as recently, partly because I've been busy with a lot of other things, but like I'll write like weekly recaps. And I'll write like in that weekly recap, like, oh, like I was working on this thing with a friend, or like, oh, this song came out. So that way, like as I'm looking back, because I feel like it's really easy when you're like keep going, 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 that you're just like, oh, time flew and nothing happened. Like it's very easy to get into that mentality. So like for me, by literally putting in those little like weekly things, and even if it's something simple like, wow, I met a new music friend, like that's something that's still like, a little win, because that could, go anywhere and it can encourage you. So I think by being intentional with like even recognizing those tiny things are huge, um, and like saving them somehow. So that's what I do.
Corinne or Joe, would you like to share?
I like to keep a gratitude notebook, but after what you said about the gratitude alphabet, I love that idea. So I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely relate to that, Kenneth, because like I oftentimes say that the reward for hard work is the opportunity to do more work. Like, I mean, like that is like a thing I've said to many, many people over the years. And I say to myself, I'm like, hey, the fact that I'm still able to do this, is pretty lucky. But I think like taking the time to record that milestone, to commemorate in some kind of way or to share with somebody else is really, really helpful. And so I think like, for me, because like, if you are familiar with the 5 love languages, like one of mine is words of affirmation, as well as like quality time. I just think, okay, if I'm experiencing something, I oftentimes am hesitant to share it with others. Like, oh, I got this really cool thing. It feels weird to me. And so I oftentimes say, okay, I'm going to use that as a moment to celebrate with somebody, like someone who's a part of the project, or my significant other, or every once in a very blue moon, like one of my parents, because they tend to like respond with like criticism. That's their form of love. But like sometimes I share something with them because it makes it like more real to me. Like, wow, like I can't believe this thing happened, and this is. I want somebody else to hear about it and like tell me like this is reality. So those are some of the ways that I try and kind of commemorate that.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, other questions or approaches to this work in terms of like how you approach your craft and finding ways to get more done.
I think what Ashley said about making space, making space with the time and the timer, that's really important. And for me, like one of the hardest things about this pandemic is that like I'm used to being alone at home. And so when I'm writing, I think it's probably similar to you guys. Like when you're writing something that is full of emotion, you got to like sit with it and like dive deep into that emotion. And it is ridiculously hard with the children running around at home, like constantly asking you for a snack. So before wildfire season happened here in California last year, I was actually like going and writing in my car, parked in the driveway, just so I could close the door and get out of the house away from my children. But once I was able to remove myself from the environment and just be in a different environment, like even just for like 15 minutes, it was enough to actually get something going on. So I would say to myself, I'm just going to go sit in my car and write for 5 minutes, where also it helps that there is no Wi-Fi out in my car, right? I'm going to sit with my notebook in the car and just scribble for 5 minutes. And then you're right. Like I would be like, okay, let me just keep 5 minutes would go by and I would just keep writing. And I would keep writing until a little kid would come out and ask me for a snack.
That's great. I oftentimes find that like some of my most creative ideas actually happen when I'm walking the dog or when I'm taking a shower. And not like, the shower thoughts Reddit thread kind of thing where it's like, some mind-blowing revelation that doesn't make sense. But like, I'll just like, for recently, like, we've been working on this album for our band, and like, I'll just be walking the dog and like a line will come in to my head. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta jot this down. I'll do a voice memo or something like that. And I find that like, it's because of like, I'm removing myself from the normal environment and just in a different space. And like, and I just say, okay, if I'm walking the dog, I gotta pay attention to them because there's cars going around. I can't be like scrolling on my phone or doing anything else. And I think it just helps a lot. The other thing that I found is like creating a space to work. And when you're in that space, like that's all you do. Like you work on whatever it is. So like this room that I have here, I just, when I need to work on writing or on music or something like that, like that's what the space is for. I can't be in here like, I don't know, streaming The Warrior or whatever show I'm watching or something like that. When I come in here, I have to come in with a very specific intention, and that's also helpful too. So like designating certain patterns, or like kind of getting yourself in the mood, or like these are all things that like, they're like little mental triggers for ourselves. Or like for some people, they think like, okay, when I put on my uniform to go to work, like I'm in work mode. And some artists will paint like in their overalls, or like have a specific outfit, or they wear a certain hat, or they have a certain pair of glasses, or whatever it is. Like, you can think of like these as like charms or tokens that just help put us in the right headspace, or it could just be a literal transformation of the space and the place around us. Say, okay, when I'm in this particular place, like I'm going to do these things.
Oh my God. So also on the having ideas in the shower, I heard one of the main reasons for that is because you're almost like in a meditative state. It's like the one time of the day where you don't have to think about all the other things going on because you're just focused on like getting clean or whatever. So all these creative ideas come to you. So I forget who told me this, but they recommended like another great way to spawn ideas is to meditate and to get your mind clear so you can welcome all those ideas.
Yeah, definitely. And if you find that like that space like helps, like you could figure out other ways to get into that creative mindset more. So like for a while, like taking a hot bath was like my jam. I was just like, I'm not gonna take the phone with me. I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna slip in some hot water. It's like super comfortable, and not only did it like help relax, it also gave time to just process the day's thoughts or whatever as a need, to kind of work through. Does anyone have like favorite books on the topic? I know Kenneth, you mentioned 4 Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss. I mentioned The War of Art from Steven Pressfield. Are there other like works, blogs, podcasts, or things that you enjoy that you find help you in this area?
I found this it's weekly, but sometimes it's on and off by, oh no, I'm going to pronounce the last name wrong, but it's called the Brass Ring Newsletter. I can also put it in the chat as well. It's by Kara Hold on. If you type in the Brass Ring newsletter, it'll pop up. It's a newsletter on creativity, and what I like is they're Kara Kutruzula. And what I really like is it's bite-sized, like morning thoughts that she does on creativity. They're really short. They usually include like a little quote and then sometimes like a video that someone has recommended to her. And I think for me, having that was nice because like when I did check my emails in the morning, there would be like a thought about like creativity. And it wasn't even like hustler creativity mentality. It was more like the wandering, gentle creativity kind where it's like, you know what I mean? Where it's something that's like easy to take in, but still is something that you can chew on throughout the day. So I really like that. So that way, as I'm checking emails and like some of them are like, I don't want to deal with, but like seeing that in my email box in the mornings was really nice and also got me starting to think in that way as well. So it's called, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other resources, blogs, podcasts, newsletters, or things that you all like?
What are your thoughts? Like, this is for everyone, but like, what are your thoughts on like grind culture and hustle porn versus like mental health and like, staying sane?
I have a lot of thoughts on that one, but yeah, I mean, anyone want to share and jump in?
So I don't know how applicable this would be to you guys because there's a writing coach. Her name is Becca Syme, and she does this course called Strengths for Writers. And in this course, she makes you take the Clifton Strengths Test, which is used by a lot of companies and businesses for you to help you. It's basically like a personality test that tells you like what you're really like what your top strengths in. And then she does this individual coaching session to basically talk to you about your writing process and how you can basically be a better writer. But one of the things that she does with the Clifton Strengths is that she will sit there and she'll tell you like, this is why you write the way you do, and why when you try to do what this other writer is doing, who you're like who seems so much more successful, because let's be honest, as artists, we're always comparing ourselves to our peers, right? You're like, why did that person get this? Or like, why isn't my book hitting this list, right? And so she will sit down with you and say, like, looking at your strengths, this is what you're good in, and this is what you need to focus on. And in terms of like hustle culture, like, yes, there are writers. Like I have peers who are literally like writing one book a month. Like, I don't know how they do that. they don't have children, maybe that's it, right? Or their children are grown, right? You know, I have peers who are like making 6 and 7 figures indie publishing, stuff like that, and I'm not doing that. And you know, their writing processes are different, their strengths are also very different. And it was really illuminating to me to like take that Clifton strengths test and realize where my strengths were and why, like, even if I tried to do the same methodologies or the same things that they did, like my peers did, like why it wouldn't work for me.
I think for me, I definitely will confess when I see those like if you're on TikTok, they always have those mini clips of like, you gotta wake up and do it the next day, the next year. And they're like all these little videos that are like stitched together. Yeah, they're inspiring. But like I think as somebody who went through a pretty bad bout of depression, like that's always in the back of my mind. I'm like like you said, Kenneth, like at what cost? Like what are you not telling me by glamorizing this? That's kind of dangerous, and like encouraging people to kind of push themselves over the edge. So I think discipline is important. Like, and even Simon used that word several times, like discipline, but always, again, keeping in mind that you need to make sure that you're okay as you do these things as well. And then one thing that helped me as well is just in being able to connect with other creatives. So very different workflows and work paces than me. Like I'm really good at generating ideas really fast, but like executing and like that editing process is not something I enjoy, and it doesn't come as quickly to me versus other people who maybe takes a while to generate, like are kind of the flip of me. And I think seeing different people's processes and how they work and working alongside with them, it just made me realize like, you know, maybe yeah, someone's putting a song out a month or whatever, and like maybe other people aren't, and it doesn't mean one's better than the other. It's just different work styles. So, and there's a lot that we don't know as well. So
Yeah, I think those are definitely really great reflections of it. I think when it comes to that kind of culture, it's important to think about like if are they just doing this to be performative? Like, what is the reason that people kind of do these things? And are we buying into that? Or is it something that's actually contributing to our own well-being, our own like goals that we're trying to like when you just say like, I'm going to bypass that entirely and just focus entirely on my goals and what I need to do to get there. It's almost like it doesn't matter, like all this other stuff. They're just kind of like, they can be distractions. When it comes to like, the reason why people call it like hustle porn or hustle culture is because people tend to like consume it, but they actually don't do a whole lot with it. Like, so there's an entire like culture of people here who like to watch cooking videos who do not cook themselves. They will watch travel videos and documentaries, but never go to any of these places. They will watch exercise videos and videos about optimizing their body, but not actually join a gym. In the same way, there are people who will watch all these videos like Instagram hacks and like productivity hacks and all this stuff like about business and not actually do the work. And so I'm like, if it is something that actually motivates you and gets you into the right headspace where you're actually grinding out and doing work, great. But if it's like an unhealthy consumption, or we're only doing it for the sake of, say, bragging about it or to like put it in our feeds, then all of a sudden it's detrimental to our art and to our own like mental well-being. And so like I used to watch a bunch of these videos and stuff too. I'm like, oh yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk, like he just spits it out and all this. And I was like, wait, he just says the same thing all the time, but he's not actually saying anything that's of use to me. Like, you know what I mean? Just like for him to be like, yeah, just, you know, just go and do it. Like, okay, great. Like like, I want to make sure that the information I'm consuming is actually helpful, beneficial, and building towards something. And also like that I want to make sure the people I'm getting information from, like they're also doing something that's genuinely invested into the community and into building something out that's lasting, instead of like something that is just serving like an ego or something like that. So those are some like very, very quick thoughts, but I think that, you know, Amy and Ashley both provided some great reflections on that.
I just love hearing what other people think. Like I love watching it, but it also gets me like pumped up. And then like whenever I share it with friends, they're like they just run away from it. But I consume it differently. Like I love working. Like I'm a workaholic, but like in a good way, I guess. So like that stuff, like I love it. But like for other people, I'm just like I just like seeing what other people think of it.
It could totally be for entertainment, and that's like a whole different thing, right? But to buy into like the mythology or to the culture of it, that's a whole different thing. And I'm like, if it gets people to actually do something good with their lives, then great. If it's actually discouraging, or if it creates a culture where just comparing oneself to others, then that's not a super healthy way of approaching things. So I mean, like kind of like Amy mentioned, like it's so easy to like get into that mindset where we're just constantly comparing ourselves with others, particularly around their achievements. This is something that's has been especially the case with this particular generation, and like with the rise of social media, because all of a sudden we're comparing followers, we're comparing likes. We're not thinking like, wow, there's a couple hundred people that really like what I'm doing. We're thinking, wait, how come I don't have 10,000 followers or 100,000 or something like that? Like that's a, pre-social media days, like that would be a really weird thing to think about. Like, and oftentimes people have this appearance of success, but we don't actually know what they're going through. We don't know what their struggles are. We don't know if they're actually doing something sustaining with their arts career. There's a lot of people out there who buy followers too, who like they're so wrapped up in this idea of impressing other people that they go ahead and do that and like drop money into this kind of thing because they think it will buy them legitimacy or credibility and or whatever else that they're hoping it will get them. But the reality is like those things are all like detrimental. They only serve the ego. They don't actually serve the art and the work that we could try and create to do, or the change that we're trying to make. And so I think it's um, you know I think it's important to remember that your uniqueness is your greatest strength. It's not how well you emulate other people, whether it's their art or even their own process of using the art to reach other people. You got to tap into like what makes you special, what makes your voice and your own work special.